even with the presidential scholars. Most people have connections to the White House. So when I got accepted, I remember reading that letter of acceptance about 50 times before I actually believed that I was there.
This is Journey to Point B, where you can find success stories of people who have achieved the same goals you're striving for. I'm your host, Lucia Csoma, and it's my hope that these stories will provide motivation for your own journey to Point B. Let's begin. Lourdes, welcome. It's such a pleasure to have you on my show.
Thank you for having me.
I'm very excited about this conversation because it's quite amazing what you have accomplished. You are a presidential leadership scholar. You are an executive director of financial health pathways that is working to improve the financial health of Central Texas. That's a big mission. And on top of that, you're awarded by the Austin Business Journal as one of the most influential women in Central Texas in 2021. I'm curious, Lourdes, where did this journey start?
Well, thank you for the introduction. I think I remember just starting very young and just growing up in Lima, Peru. That's where I'm from. And I moved here to the US about 23 years ago. But it started really young for me to almost always wanted to stand on my own feet. And I grew up in a very public, if you wish, life because my father is a writer and someone that is known in my country. So I think I wasn't um, allowed to misbehave or just, I was always, I felt like I was always watch. I was very rebellious to begin with. And I think that not being able to just have a normal uh, teen life was always something that I resented almost. But nevertheless, it wasn't a bad thing. It was just more when you're young, you're always thinking like, you want to do crazy things just like every other young person, but you always have to think, or I was expected to think about the repercussions, the consequences, and how that reflects my family. So, in a way, it's always harder for a young person. But then as I got older, I turned out to go to school and become a journalist. So, same writer as my father, but in a different industry. And then I think it was more, I was always the daughter of somebody or someone that I will not have my own identity, but I will have my father's identity. And I was always associated that way. And I think that back to being rebellious, I always wanted to be my own person. And so I moved here to the US and really didn't have anyone here. I didn't know anyone in the US and I didn't even speak English. So you can imagine the journey was very difficult. And at the beginning, I think especially my first 2 or 3 years were very lonely and almost felt like I couldn't communicate. And that was something that was very daunting. But at the same time, I think that I was writing my own story. So that was kind of exciting. Didn't know what the path was at the moment, but I think that I learned a lot. I met a lot of great people and got to hear their stories. And it almost felt like liberating to be able to just draft my own path and not having to carry on with someone else's. And for me, that was looking for my own identity when you're young in your 20s, which I was when I moved here. Um, I almost felt like that was my most exciting part. Nevertheless, I worry a lot during those years, but I think that that was very much liberating for me to be able to just stand on my own feet and just design my own path, journey, story, however you want to call it.
Thank you for sharing that. Lourdes, when you started on this journey to leave your country, you're very comfortable. It seems like You had a wonderful path in your country. There was no anticipated struggles, and yet you came to this new country where everything was new. I'm curious, what were you hoping to find here?
That's an interesting question. I think that if anything, I was hoping to find my own purpose, right? I think that very young, I realized that everyone has a much bigger purpose that their own self and life. I think I was always reflective growing up. I grew up Catholic, and I used to go to these places and talk to nuns and priests, and very philosophical in a way. Most people would be playing with, I don't know, football or volleyball or whatever the sport was at the time. And for me, it was more about reading and reflecting. And not to say that I didn't do any of the normal things that young kids do, but I always had that level of reflection. And so for me, I think that I was always preoccupied about, is my life it? Or is there anything bigger? And so I think I always have that awareness of that one's life is a small part of something much bigger. And for me, purpose is something that I always thought I needed to find. And when I came here, I think that as difficult as the journey was, because I would say when you leave your home country and you almost had it mapped out to, I was a somewhat a rising star in journalism. I wanted to work for newspapers that, were the newspapers in my hometown, and I did, and wanted to work with icons that after I moved called me to work with them, and that was just life. So I couldn't just go that route, but I think in the end I came just looking for just to be me and to find my bigger purpose. And I carried that since I was very young, writing pieces for the newspapers. I kind of went for social impact and almost always creating access to significant issues that affected my country at the time. We were a country that were very much impacted by terrorism and have a lot of economic issues and poverty. And I think through my pieces, I always try to create awareness of those issues for people to think, that there are other parts of the world that probably don't have the access and the resources that we have here in the US. So I think that that was at the time what I thought it would be my purpose. And when I moved here, I still wanted to not just fend for myself, but also how do I open access to resources to people that look like me and to people that really don't have the tools and the ability to um, create their own path to success. And I think that that was the hope. It was to make it, but also to help others make it. And I think when you look at through that lens, or at least for me, it was easier to navigate the many and countless challenges that an immigrant goes through when you move to a new country with no one to help you.
Mhm. I can relate a little bit.
I'm sure you can. You also can in different countries. So it's interesting you said that, because the people that I met in like these little jobs that I got at the beginning, I was working as a prep cook at a restaurant or a daycare teacher. Those are the only jobs I could get because I couldn't speak English. So when I met the people around me that were also from different countries, as a writer, I almost felt like this is just characters in a novel, right? And they all have the same story except that they are different
Mm,
characters. Like I met someone from Nicaragua, Miss Maria, and she escaped violence in her country and never wanted to stay in the US. She just said, I just want to put my kids through college and go back because I miss my country. We have Ramiro from Mexico, and he was our dishwasher, and he would share stories with us. And I almost felt like every single person, every single immigrant I met, they all wanted to care for someone, but they couldn't at their hometowns. And they moved here to just make a little bit of money and provide for their families. And then they wanted to go back. In a way, you see these stories and you hear the stories, and it's almost fascinating to hear that every single one of the immigrants I met, we all have one thing in common. It's just different stories and different scenarios that we all have.
It's beautiful. And now you are helping people, and you're helping people by providing financial education, financial support, so they do not struggle with the very thing that they came here for. And I'm curious, at what point in your journey you felt that I can help people?
I think that in my work life, for the longest time, I thought I was helping people, and in a way, I was helping
Mm.
myself. It was, I think people help me more than I help them. And the reason I say this is because it is easy for us to see what we don't have. But when you look at the way people navigate a system that is not designed to help them succeed, when you see people that have families that they can't feed because they're thinking that they have to pay rent and they have to make that choice. Do I pay rent or do I feed my
Mm.
kids? And so I think of it as it's a lesson to keep me humble and grateful for the blessings I have. And yes, I did have those moments myself at the very beginning when I first moved here where, if there were food at the daycare that they will have to throw away, I will take a couple of bowls and that was my dinner. And when people think of that and they're like, I can't believe you went through that. I, I had days that I probably couldn't eat because I didn't have a lot of money and I had to pay my rent. And when people know that about you, they think, oh my gosh, like you don't seem like someone that would struggle. Well, there's a lot of people that don't seem like they're struggling,
Yeah.
but they are. And so for me, when I talk to people and the people that we serve, in a way, I see myself as the person that I was 23 years ago that really didn't have anything. And I also see and remember the people that did help me.
Mhm.
And there weren't that many, but there were some. And those are the memories I keep. And so for them, I might be those people that I remember that gave me a hand and said, you know what, you can take a couple of bowls, like the director of this daycare, or someone that gave me a ride and said, oh, you can be walking at night, by yourself. And there are people out there in the world helping others and thinking more than just helping themselves. So for me, I think that helping people in a way helps you to know the value of relationships and the value of generosity, because we live in a society where we tend to think about us all the time. And I think that when you think of others, then it's a full circle. It comes back to you. And for me, that has been the blessings, is that while able to help people, I think I was able to have things in perspective. Like, not everybody has the things that I have now. Not everybody has the access and the ability to navigate those systems. So if I can help them with that, in a way, is not just a way to connect with people and build relationships with them, but also learn from them and how we can help each other. And I think that that has been a constant in my life, is that in spite of all the people that really didn't want me to succeed and label me in a certain way, I remember those just to learn how to
Mm.
handle that. And I prefer to keep the memories of the people that did help me and that did see my worth and who I was as a person, not for a stereotype, but who I really
I
was.
really like what you said, that you took that as data of how to deal with similar situations, but you didn't get discouraged by that. You didn't get defined by that. You didn't believe whatever they were saying. You were creating your own stories, and you chose to believe in the people that believed in you and the people that were cheering for you.
You kind of have to, right? Life is difficult as it is. And nevertheless, my journey must look glamorous today, but that wasn't always the case. I had to put my head down and clean vegetables, fish, seafood. And at the time, I was a prep cook and didn't really speak English. So people would make fun of me, the
Mm.
servers and people around in the restaurant and managers. So like, you're just someone there in the corner cleaning something. And so oftentimes that is what we do. We don't think of anything at the time, but we make fun of those people. We don't really call them by their name. So I wasn't really Lourdes. I was, hey, the girl that is cleaning the
Mm.
shrimp in the corner that has an accent. And you kind of have to rely on being positive and surrounding yourself by people that see you for you and not for what you're doing at the time. And I think that for me, that has been something that I had to work really hard, because at the beginning it's kind of discouraging to be someone that has the education and has the knowledge and has quite a bit of experience in the world, yet here you feel almost like an
Mm.
infant, like you're just coming out and like learning everything for the first time. And that gives you a level of insecurity that people that have never left the country probably will not relate to. And you kind of have to expose yourself a little and be vulnerable. And you are, for a lot of people. And so if you're not positive, if you're not thinking, you know what, there's people that have it worse than me. So we just have to keep moving forward. There's no other way to get through life. And I think this taught me a lot of humility and a lot of lessons that I carry with me, that not everybody's going to like me, not everybody's going to be kind to me. And if people are unkind or make fun of me, I just smile and try to talk to someone that I trust, that someone that loves me, and shake that
Mm.
off. And I feel like we have to somehow, some way, cope with that. But those moments, again, they teach you something. They teach you not to be reactive, not to let other people define you, not to give people the power to make you feel inferior just because you can't speak to
Mhm.
them. I mean, I'm very eloquent in Spanish, and that was my frustration when I came here, is that I'm my Spanish, not just as South American but also as a writer, is a little bit more elevated than most people's Spanish. I have to, because I'm a professional in that field. So to not be able to speak English at the level that I do speak my own language, it's always frustrating for me. It has been always frustrating for me. And so when people pick on you, you kind of want it to be eloquent, but you can't. And so you have a lot of frustration. And that, you have to be able to digest that and let it go. And so that's an exercise that you do every day. And to this day, I still do
Mhm.
it. There are still people that will label me in a certain way because I have an accent or because I look in a certain way, even in spaces where I'm the only Latina or I'm the only woman. And so I think that you have to learn how to cope with that and have to not give people the power to define you, and just know your own worth and stand on your own feet.
Yeah, I see. It's like acting in what is within your control. When you said like, I just smile. That's in your control. They cannot change. We cannot change them. I believe that even having these conversations as we're having now, like raising the awareness that it is a reality and those jokes do have an impact, but it takes strength to not get caught up in that, not be defined by that, not let that dictate the story that you want to create for yourself. As you are now helping other people, you have these accomplishments. I'm curious, what were some of the stepping stones, some of the milestones in your journey that are worth noting?
I think the stepping stones that I can identify. So back to the times that I just moved here and I was doing these jobs that, they were just jobs to pay my living expenses. And I think in a way it furthered my lack of confidence. I know most people will think that I'm crazy to say that, because the appearance of being someone confident doesn't equal that you are. And that's very much true in my case. I have a lot of self doubt, if you wish, and confidence is something I have to work every day very hard at having a level of confidence that allows me to do what I do. It doesn't come naturally to me. So when you're doing these little jobs, it can really impact that lack of confidence and even push you even more into that self doubt. So for me, I think that it wasn't until I decided to come out of my shell. I'm by nature a very introverted person. I isolated myself at the very beginning, and just lack of trust and confidence in my ability to communicate, maybe, and just by my own personality. I think I'm a very um, shy and not very outgoing person. So I think for the first few years, again, I isolated myself, so it was very lonely, and my own self doubt will be magnified. So I thought I was just meant to do these jobs that um, will not take me anywhere other than go to work and prep cook and then come home, and that's it. And it wasn't until I started socializing with people and with good people that will point out at me and say, you have so much talent and you have high capabilities to do more than what you're doing now. So why don't you pursue, something that matches your skills? And I keep thinking, no. And I will go through, job descriptions with, at the time, an HR director. She's my best friend now. And she'll say, you can do this job. And I will look at things one by one and say, oh, you know what? These are not, I can't do any of this. She's like, well, you think that everybody can just meet that list? You have the ability to learn too.
Mhm.
So you can always learn. And so when people start pointing out the things that I could potentially do and giving me almost a sense of believing in myself because they do believe in me, it almost opened a new set of opportunities for me. Fighting against my own self doubt was, when you're lonely, fighting those doubts is harder to see the potential. But it wasn't until I surrounded myself with people that believed in
Mhm.
me and believed in what I
Mhm.
could potentially do that I start looking and trying to swim a little farther from shore. And I think that that was pivotal to me, that finding those two or three people that believe probably more than I do in myself is when I realize there is a great deal of potential uh, in me, and there are other things that I could do. And it almost was like day and night. Like I realized, I'm worth at least looking for those opportunities and putting myself out there. And that's when I start looking for volunteer opportunities to serve on boards on different nonprofits and hospitals and clinics. Health was a big uh, issue for me. And so I wanted to advocate for people to have access to healthcare and education. And obviously, I represent the Latino community. So I wanted to give my time to causes that will embrace the Latino community and open that access, and, maybe even like address language barriers and things like that.
Mhm.
So I do think that that was a stepping stone for me, and pivotal to where I am today, is that finding good people and surrounding myself with people that believed in me and building those relationships with people that, rather than looking at all the wrong things um, in me and the things that, obviously, I work hard, but it's a constant, um, and it's something that you have to work every day at. We'll look at the things that I do well, and the encouragement and the trust that I have from those friends, and most of them still to this day my friends. I think that that was, uh, on a personal level, a moment that I remember and carry with me, and a lesson that I carry with me, but also professionally, because I wouldn't be where I am if I didn't have people that believed in me and even expressed that to me.
I like what you said at the end, that even express that, because so often we are not aware the power of our words. We are not aware what a difference a smile, an encouragement can make in someone's life. It can really put them on a trajectory of success and reaching their goals if we take the time to say what we see in them, to show why we believe in them, and to help them find that within themselves as well, because it's there.
Right. And, and the reason I emphasize that is because oftentimes people think it's a
Mm.
given, right? And, I work for a lot of people. And out of all the people I work, I can only count two of them that when I was working in hotels, for example, I have the friend that I mentioned, the HR director, Aisha. She's my best friend. And not only that, she cared about people, but she
Mm.
expressed that belief in me. But she didn't have to express that. But when she mentioned these things and said, "Why don't you?" And I'm like, "Well, out of all people, why are you telling me this? Like, don't you supposed to try to keep me?" She said, "Well, I don't want to keep you if your potential is more, right? Like if
Yeah.
you're here doing like a server job, but you're capable of managing people, why don't you just pursue that? I mean, you have to look at, how to excel on things." And same thing with, food and beverage director I work for. He asked me, he pulled me aside and said, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "I mean, you're so intelligent, you're so articulated, and you're witty. You clearly watch the news and can carry a conversation about almost any topic. But yeah, you're serving people here like waiting on tables. And don't you think that you have a degree in journalism?" And I was like, "Oh gosh, like this guy like has taken the time to even look at my resume and see what I've done before." And before I moved here, he was European though. So he kind of knew that, he needed to steer me in that
Mm.
direction too. He said, "I hope this is not your end goal."
Mm.
So again, it's expected for people that manage you to care and to see your value, but very few will express that. And when you clearly that have made an impact in me, because I don't remember out of those moments like more than two people telling me this. It's almost like we're so wrapped up in every day, and very few of us will pull someone aside and say, "You have a lot of potential, you should probably go and tap on it." And so when you do that, you make an impact on somebody's life. You make an impact on that person and almost give them that nudge to say, "Gosh, I see you, like someday you're going to go like places." It clearly left a mark in me. And so I do think that there is powerful moments like this that you can actually pull someone aside and tell them the potential you see in
Yeah.
them.
What was the biggest step that you had to take?
Fighting my own
Mm.
self. I think I struggle a lot with, am I capable of doing this? And the higher I go, the more scared I feel to this day. And I think we can be our worst enemy. I clearly am my worst enemy. And I think I have quite a few people that have pointed out at me that that's something that I have to really work at it. I have a couple of people that know me for a very long time that have said, "What is it that you have to prove? And what is it that you have to do or accomplish for you to feel like you don't have to prove yourself anymore? I mean, you've accomplished great success professionally. You have a wonderful mission and a job that is moving and changing systems and making them better. You professionally and personally have earned a lot of recognition. So it's almost like you still that person 23 years ago that is with her head down cleaning seafood. And it's almost like even to this day, you still that person So you still have not overcome your insecurities. And that is very much true. And at the time, it kind of was hurtful to hear. And I think that that almost simplifies, the entire time that I've been in this country, feeling like I have to overcome myself. So I do think that where while I have been the driver of my own story, I have also been the obstacle of that
Mm,
story. And having to always feel like I have to ask permission to be in certain spaces and always have to prove that I deserve to be in those spaces. Um, even with the presidential scholars, it was my first try. It was a very difficult process, and a lot of people applied to it from every state in the country. And the rate of acceptance of Latinos is 3%. And most people have connections to the White House. They have been interns at the White House or have family or friends that work at any of the foundations that put this program. I have none of those connections. So it almost felt like, that's a long shot, but we'll see. And so when I got accepted, I remember reading that letter of acceptance about 50 times before I actually believed that I was there. And you'll think that that's a moment of joy, which it was, but it's almost like, that's got to be a
mm.
mistake. And then again, I remember thinking, why do I keep thinking this way? I am accepted. I am a scholar now. And again, I feel like that's the biggest barrier, is just my insecurities and my self-doubt. I think that just thinking that I still have to prove myself after all these years, and after, what most people will consider quite a an array of accolades, although they don't mean anything to me. I think that how I see awards and accolades is that it puts more responsibility on you to be better, and that's how I take them. And if anything, I reframe it in my head to, if I don't do it for me, which I often think, I'm gonna go and receive this and probably say a few words, and it's not my favorite part of the the process. Um, I love the pat in the back, but I think I do it more for young people to see themselves in the Latina that is getting the award or getting recognized, and think that, yeah, you can, that can be
Mhm.
you. I do it just, I think, for that, not necessarily for the glam and the glitz that most people think is everything. And it fizzles out in less than 5 minutes. You go home and you still like have to take the trash out and everything that most people do. So it's not that glamorous. You go home and you still have feelings, and you still have to be you, and with all your insecurities, especially in my case. So I think that, overcoming my own self is perhaps the biggest barrier I have. But I'm also like, it's the duality I identify in me. Like, I can be the best driver of my own story and own my own story, which is something that I really want to do, is to just take ownership of my own story and design that story, whether it's a longer path, which I chose. Um, I didn't take any shortcuts. I actually took longer paths. And I think that I enjoy that. But I also have been my own self, kind of climbing and looking behind and thinking, oh my gosh, it's so scary that I'm like getting so high. But that's life. And as someone that I care deeply and spent a lot of years of my life with, said to me, um, Francisco used to say to me, is not the destination, is the journey. And that's how I see my life.
What was the biggest opportunity that was created for you, that was offered to you?
I'm grateful because the biggest opportunity that I ever had is to do what I love
Mm.
doing. And I don't think that I take that for granted. I think that there are opportunities that sometimes we're too wrapped up in every day that we don't see and we don't go for. But I'm grateful that I have a reflective nature and a sense of awareness and of my surrounders. I think that introverts, and particularly people that are good at listening, which I am, have the ability and the emotional intelligence to see opportunities and to see around them in a way that other people can't. When you listen, you're very in touch with not only your feelings, but everybody else's
Mhm.
feelings and what happens around you. And so the people that talk a lot, I think that they're really wrapped up in that and how they want to communicate.
Mhm.
A listener is a more observant person. And so you are able to see around you and even things that are nonverbal, you catch that. And so I think because of that, I was given a talent to see opportunities and the vision to go for them. And I'm able to make my own path and create what success looks like for me. It might not be the traditional, conventional way people think of success, but that's my success.
Mhm.
So, if anything, that to me is the biggest gift, is that doing something you love that helps other people, that gives me joy. And money is not everything in life. And I learned that very young. I know that, sometimes people think it's money. The issues that we have are all triggered by money, but it isn't. I think that you have to do what you love. Obviously, we all have responsibilities. That's not necessarily that we don't need money. But for me, having the opportunity to live my life on my own terms and have zero apologies for the things that I've done that have only impacted me and design my own success.
Mhm.
I think that there's no better opportunity than that. So I'm grateful with, I don't know, God, life, luck, all of them, or whichever way that came about. But I think that I could be trapped in a job that I don't love and have to work through that and probably be miserable. But that's not a life I will embrace. I will rather just not do it. So I think that when I think of it in perspective, I can complain a lot about the things that happen in my life and the loss I have and the moments that were not glamorous. But when I think about my life, I wake up and do things that I like. And we all have problems, but it's how you handle them. It's not how you fall, but how you get up and carry on with your life. And having humility, which life has taught me at every turn, having a generous mentality, not just how much I take, but how much I give. And that goes for everything, not just at your job. Like in relationships, you see people that only take. And I almost suffer that too. That the more I was doing and the more public I was, I find a lot of people that come to me because they want something, but not once have made a phone call to say, "How are
Mhm.
you?" So it's like, hey, I need. And so I learned to be very selective with the people that I let in and who I call my friends. You can be an acquaintance, but not necessarily a friend. If you're always calling me because you need something, then you're an
Mhm.
acquaintance. And I have this good friend of mine telling me, you have to put people in buckets and you have to always purge. The people that always take but never give, they're always asking but never giving you. You have to have restricted access. Like they have to have restricted access to you.
Mhm.
And surround yourself with the people that not only take from you but give you. And when I heard that, I was like, that makes sense. Like there is the friends that are there for the glamour and the good times, but very few will ask you, how are you doing? I know I talk a lot about me, but how are you
Mhm.
doing? And those are the friends that I keep in my life and they have access 24/7 to me and that I will do anything. for. And you have the other type of friends that will only be there just when they need something or when there is a good time to have. And I think that those are okay too. It's just how you dosify the time. I used to be available to everyone 24/7. As I get older, I just have limited access for some of that. You get wiser as you get older and more selective. And I rather have quality of friendships and spend quality of time with them than having people that are always taking but not refilling my cup. And so I think that that's how I see now
Mhm.
relationships.
What would you say, Lourdes, to a young person that comes into this country and they want to make it work? They want to make this country their own. They want to be a professional here, but they don't believe it's possible for themselves. What would be some of the things that you would tell them?
I would say be generous with your talent
Mm.
and surround yourself with people that lift you up. And I think if you do those two things, open up for, give yourself the opportunity to meet other people and show that you care about others, it'll come to you.
Mm.
I think that I learned that by almost isolating myself, that no one can see that light. And compare this with a diamond. If it's like down at the bottom of the ocean, no one is going to see it. It might shine, but it will shine under. But once you bring that to the surface and someone finds it, it's like, oh gosh, what is this?
Mhm.
It's like so shiny. Let people see your shine, and be generous. And I think when you think of others, it'll come to you. It'll come back. Don't do it expecting
Mhm.
anything. When you genuinely care about others, it will come to you. And I can almost name every single time that I didn't see it at the time, but in hindsight, I look back at almost every opportunity that I was just being me and trying to help someone. And someone noticed and said, oh my gosh, this girl who went to the ER, I used to volunteer at a hospital. She was just comforting people and at the ER, and someone will notice and say, hey, can you be in the ICU, and do you need a job? We need someone to answer the phones and do some unmet work, and that you don't need a lot of but you seem to be very comfortable talking to people. And I was a volunteer for the ER. I was supposed to talk to people at the ER.
Mhm.
So it was just something that I do as second nature, but there is always going to be someone that will notice and say, oh my gosh, there is talent in this person. How can we help them?
Mhm.
And again, it's not the expectation, but it's just how you expose yourself to others. And also there will be people that will not be so kind. Take that as that's life, right? Not everybody is kind. But once you're surrounded by people that really care about you, and once you're generous and let people see your talent, it'll come back to you.
Mhm.
I think that there is a lot of people that I met, immigrants that I met, that similar story. They came here with nothing and they made something of themselves. But be always grateful for the things that you have and how you can help others with those stories and those moments. It's always a stepping stone to something else. And I think the last thing I'll say is don't let anyone define you and define your worth. Always make sure that you know your worth
Mhm.
and that you take ownership of your own story. What you do in life as a job doesn't define you. It's only you who defines you, your values and your outlook in life. So don't ever give that power to someone else that is not in your shoes, because that person might not have your insights, your background story, and your values. So only you can take ownership of that story. And I think at the beginning of my life, I kind of wanted I was expected to do things. I was supposed to do this, supposed to do that. And so you're living someone else's life. Once you leave that and take ownership of your life, then for good or for bad, because there will be moments you make mistakes and bad decisions, that's something you also have to
Yeah.
own. That you have to own it as a whole, right? The good and the bad. And when you do something that wasn't so smart or wasn't so kind, you learn not to do it again. And when you do something good, you take pride on it, celebrate that small victory, right? So that story is yours. It's yours to tell, it's yours to make something out of. And so just taking ownership of your own story, I think it will be something that will make you a better person.
Yeah. I think that also removes excuses, but it gives you power to know that you are the only one that can define you. It doesn't matter what anybody else says around you. Lourdes, what is one goal that you're working towards these days?
I think I'm working in having more of a free time to do things that I enjoyed. I tend to work and be very driven to work. And I can almost forget that I have friends that I need to see or that I just sit down through a movie. It's a challenge. I'm like constantly looking at my phone, constantly looking at, emails I have to send. So I'm not really good at setting boundaries with work. And I know that when you say your work is your passion, and yes and no, your work should not be your
Mhm.
life. And as much as I love my job and what I do, I think I have to also live my own life. And, my friends resent me for not having the time. And those are things that I need to work on. I need to be present, even when we are at dinner and I'm looking at my phone and I'm constantly trying to like do something that is work. And I joke with a friend, I can't even see through a movie because I'm thinking that there's a grant application I have to do, and there are other things that I need to do that I have to do, and I tend to overwhelm myself with work and forget to live my life. So I think I'm trying to make more space for my personal relationships and my um, even just a relationship with
Mhm.
myself, and just sit still rather than overwhelming my schedule and my calendar with things, because then I feel like I'm not being productive. And that's just going to the other side, right? So for me, I think that that's something that I've noticed throughout my career, that I almost feel like I can't shut that off. And so I'm working very hard at making space for Lourdes and my personal life, and the things that I enjoy. And whether that's traveling, whether that is watching a movie, going to a concert, or things that, just not worry about work. And it is a true challenge for me. So it's that everyday reminder that today is Friday. And so I should be shutting off at 5 and go for a walk, go for lunch with someone, and not worry about work.
Mhm. Like what you said, the a relationship with myself and self care. It's a lot of relationship with ourselves.
Right. And I think that that's also a very important relationship. It's not just the external. A lot of people feel very afraid of being with themselves. I'm very comfortable being with myself, but I haven't made the time, I think, to just even know who I am today, because who I was 10 years ago is not the same person that I am today. So I think that what I do care about, my friendships and the people around me, the people I care about, and the people that care about me, I also have to work in having some space for myself and really be in touch with who I am
Mhm.
now so I can embrace her. And I think that one doesn't have to exclude the other. I can have enough time for friends, but also for myself. And I think that that's the challenge for me now, is just finding time and and really stick to it, because I make plans and sometimes it's like, oh, but there's a grant and I have to produce this. And there's always an excuse to not have free time. And somebody just even pointed out to me, like, you don't even have to have an excuse to be free, just be free. So it's funny and interesting how we try to put things on our schedule. And now I'm like more like I'm trying to not have things on my schedule so that I know that it's me time and I have to just stick to
Mhm.
it.
For people that are interested in what you're doing, they want to follow you, what would be the best way for them to do so?
I'm very active on LinkedIn, so you all can look me up on LinkedIn. And I tend to just share things that I do with the organization. We're trying to fight poverty and create access and improve our systems in Texas. And just so I also share personal things that I'm doing, trips that I go for, and other things that are more like my volunteer experience, advocating for the Latino community and other causes like children and just education in general. Um, so LinkedIn, Facebook are places where you can find me. You can also go to our website and see the work that we do is www.financialhp.org. That's where you can find what Financial Health Pathways is doing in our community and the great work we're doing in Texas. And yeah, I hope that you can be engaged in whichever way you want to, with our organization, but also with me, and send me a note if any of what I said sparks something in you and you want to talk about it. And thank you again for this opportunity to tell my story and share with your audience some of the things that I've been through. I hope it was helpful to someone.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Lourdes. I honor the time that you took to share your journey and being very open to share. And I'm sure that there are going to be others that will find things in your story that can relate and help them in their own journey. Thank you.
Thank you. Muchas gracias.
I hope this episode gave you some inspiration for reaching your goals. If you found it useful, please hit the subscribe button. This will help me bring you more inspirational stories to support your own journey to point B. Thank you.